4 people were squeezed into a 2-square-meter room. If they could last 24 hours, they would win a 100,000 yuan prize. The room had everything they needed, but the passageway was ridiculously narrow. Whenever 2 people ran into each other, they had to turn sideways just to get past. Before the 4 contestants could even adjust to the environment, the host announced the first challenge right away. Each person had to collect sticky notes of one color. Danny chose red, John chose blue, Mike chose yellow, and Ken chose green. As soon as the challenge began, the 4 of them rushed to different corners of the room, but the sticky notes were scattered everywhere, and the space was so cramped that they quickly bumped into each other, and the whole scene turned into chaos. Fortunately, it did not take long for them to come up with a solution. They decided to search different corners, one at a time. Just as things started to settle into a rhythm, Mike and Danny both announced that they had finished collecting their notes. But after checking, Mike had really completed the task, while Danny was still missing a few. To make things worse, the remaining sticky notes Danny needed were blocked from his view by Ken. And John was even worse. He secretly hid other people's sticky notes, dragging the game out until the very end. In the end, Danny and Ken worked together to finish the challenge, while John came in last. His punishment was to carry a sandbag on his back the entire time. As for Mike, who came in first, he won a massage item as his reward. Everyone thought they might finally get a little peace after that. But less than an hour later, John, burdened by the sandbag, was already so exhausted that he collapsed onto the floor. At that moment, the host announced a new challenge: pop a balloon and complete the punishment written inside. Ken went first, but he had terrible luck and drew eating chili peppers. At first, he tried to tough it out, but after only a few bites, the heat completely broke him. In the end, he could only choose to leave the room voluntarily. The remaining 3 contestants barely managed to finish their own punishments. Just when everyone thought that was already cruel enough, the host had something even worse in store. He secretly placed a can of fermented herring inside the room. In such a tiny enclosed space, the stench exploded instantly, making everyone feel like they could barely breathe. Danny was the first to give up and quit on the spot. That left only the final 2 contestants, Mike and John. With 2 people gone, the room finally did not feel quite as crowded anymore. Each of them occupied one side, and for a short while they enjoyed a rare moment of peace. But what they did not know was that the real ultimate torture was only just beginning. The host brought in an entire bucket of snow, and in the next second, dumped all the freezing snow into the room. The already tiny space instantly turned into an icebox. Mike and John were shivering violently from the cold, so frozen they could barely stay standing. As the temperature kept dropping, both their bodies and minds were pushed to the limit. In the end, Mike and John almost rushed out of the room at the same time, and so the challenge came to an end. Not a single person managed to survive the full 24 hours, and the 100,000 yuan prize went unclaimed. If it were you, how long do you think you could last? 3-meter-high wall, a $10,000 prize, 6 people, and each one must use a different method to get over it. Jack and 5 others arrive at the challenge site. In front of them stands a 3-meter-high semicircular wall. Its surface is extremely smooth, with almost no footholds or handholds. At first, they all try sprinting toward it, hoping to vault over it parkour style, but after several attempts, they all fail. The wall is simply too high to scale that way. Soon, Jack comes up with the first method, a human ladder. 4 people brace themselves at the bottom as the base. Jack climbs onto the second level, and Mike, who is the lightest, is lifted up by the others, and successfully gets over the top of the wall, becoming the first one to escape. With that first success, everyone's confidence rises. Next, they come up with a second method, a human launch. The group adjusts their positions, and the people below push upward at the same time to send Jack into the air. On the first try, Jack falls just short of the top, but no one gives up. They adjust their angle and timing again. On the second attempt, Jack finally grabs the top of the wall and makes it over successfully. Now, only 4 people remain inside. The human ladder no longer works, so Bobby thinks of a third method, climbing with help from a teammate on top. George first lifts Bobby as high as he can, so Bobby can reach for the legs dangling down from the top of the wall. Unexpectedly, even though he grabs them, he slips off. Thinking fast, they take off their clothes and tie them together into a rope. This time, Bobby grips the rope tightly, struggles his way up to the top, and escapes successfully. Seeing that this method works, George gets another idea, a running start to grab the rope, but after several jumps, he still misses by just a little. His teammates throw down even more clothes to make the rope longer. With one powerful leap, he finally grabs it firmly. Now only Tom and John are left. The 2 of them try several different methods, but in the end, they still cannot get over the wall. So if you were in this challenge, what method would you choose to get over the wall? With only 60 minutes left on the clock, 7 people were trapped in a deep, slippery vertical pit. Could they all make it out alive? The walls of the pit were nearly vertical and extremely slick from the rain. To make matters worse, the opening curved outward, making it almost impossible to simply jump up and grab the railing. At first, everyone tried running and scrambling their way out, but after several failed attempts, they had no choice but to rethink their plan. Soon, someone noticed an old rubber strip hanging down near the edge of the pit, but it was badly worn and could only provide a little support. It was far too weak to hold an adult's full weight on its own. Just as everyone was running out of ideas, Jack spotted a few small footholds in one corner of the wall. If they combined those footholds with a human ladder and the rubber strip, they might actually have a chance. To prevent slipping, Jack first wiped the water off the area around the footholds. John volunteered to crouch down and act as the base, lifting Jack upward. On the first attempt, Jack climbed to a point close to the top, but his legs began to shake. He lost his balance and he fell heavily back down. Even though he failed, the attempt gave everyone hope. After a short rest, Jack tried again. This time he stepped carefully on the footholds, steadied himself, and finally grabbed the railing, pulling himself out of the pit. Once the first person made it out, everything changed. Jack lay at the edge of the pit to help the others. George, the tallest of the group, went next and escaped smoothly with support from above and below. Mike, who was lighter in weight, used the rubber strip to climb and was quickly pulled out as well. Then it was John's turn. Jack and the others waited above to help him, but on the first try, John slipped back down halfway. Jack immediately took off his shirt and tied it around his waist as an extra aid. And on the second attempt, John finally made it out. At that point, 3 people were still left in the pit. The biggest challenge was Ken, who was the heaviest. The group came up with a new plan for him. First, he would use the rubber strip to climb upward, and once he got close enough to the top, the people above would pull with all their strength to haul him out. The process was tense and dangerous, but Ken eventually grabbed the railing and escaped. Next was Danny, who already had decent climbing ability. With guidance from his teammates, he also got out successfully. Finally, only Bobby remained. Since there was no one left at the bottom to help him, he had to rely entirely on the team above. So the 6 people above formed another human ladder. Jack once again tied on his shirt for extra security. With everyone helping, Bobby slowly climbed upward bit by bit and finally escaped the pit. In the end, all 7 of them made it out within 1 hour. If it were you, what would be the first method you'd think of to escape? Rules are simple. Retrieve the key to win the prize. However, smashing the ice is forbidden. You can only melt it bit by bit. Jack, John, and Danny participate in the challenge. At the start, all 3 use the same strategy, warming the ice with their body heat. Although slow, the ice gradually becomes wet and slippery. John soon tries a different approach, pressing his calves against the ice, but he quickly gives up due to the cold and physical strain. Jack chooses a more direct method, pressing his face and hands repeatedly on the same spot, trying to create a concentrated breakthrough. Danny, in contrast, remains calm, experimenting with different methods and observing which works best. 10 minutes pass, but progress for all 3 is still limited. At this point, John asks the host for clarification. Can we use personal items that aren't destructive? After receiving permission, he removes his ring and rubs it against the ice. Jack quickly searches his belongings and finds a plastic card, which he uses to scrape the ice. Danny has no tools and continues relying on his hands and breath to generate heat. The host then announces the tool grab round. Contestants can answer questions to earn limited time use of special tools. In the first round, Danny wins the buzzer, earning 1 minute of a hot air blower. He focuses the heat on one point, and a noticeable depression forms in the ice, the first real breakthrough of the competition. In the second round, Danny wins again, earning 10 minutes of sandpaper. He uses it to widen the depression while combining hand heat, gradually thinning the ice. Jack's ice also begins to form small dents, while John constantly changes positions, falling behind in efficiency. 40 minutes in, Danny is already close to the key at the center of the ice. The host announces the final stage rules. Tools may be used, but the key must remain undamaged. John immediately rubs the ice on the floor, while Jack places it under running water to speed up melting. Danny takes a different approach. He abandons tools and continues melting with his hands in a small, controlled area. The ice is already very thin, and tools could damage the key, whereas hands are precise and controllable. 20 minutes later, Danny successfully retrieves the key and becomes the ultimate winner. If it were you, what method would you choose to get the key? 12 contestants are trapped inside a steel bar cage as slurry begins pouring in instantly. They must remove the steel bars and escape within the time limit, but each team only has 5 spots to advance. The competition begins. The concrete pump starts up and the slurry slowly rises. Screams immediately erupt across the scene. The contestants fight against the heavy pull of the slurry, desperately trying to steady their breathing. Very soon, the slurry has risen to its highest point, and only their heads remain above the surface. And at that moment, the real competition is only just beginning. At the host's command, both teams spring into action. Team 1 1 is the first to locate the position of the first steel bar. They successfully pull it out, gaining the early advantage. Meanwhile, Team 2 gropes around in the slurry for quite a while, before finally freeing their first bar, falling temporarily behind. But the situation soon begins to reverse. After removing the first bar, Team 2 immediately divides the work among themselves, and their pace becomes faster and faster. By contrast, Team 1 suddenly falls into chaos. Even though the second steel bar hasn't yet been fully pushed into the designated slot, the team members rush to deal with the third one. It turns out Jack had been too hasty and failed to push it in all the way. By the time they turn back to fix the mistake, Team 1 has already wasted a huge amount of time. Still, Team 1 refuses to give up and soon manages to remove 2 more steel bars in a row. Only the last one remains. But that final bar is pinned down tightly by the slurry, and no matter how hard several members of Team 1 pull, they can't yank it out. On the other side, because Team 2 had divided the work clearly from the start, the slurry never piled up too heavily in one area, and the last bar is quickly pulled free. Team 2 is the first to unlock everything. Right after that, they immediately untie the ropes around their feet and successfully escape. Just when everyone thinks Team 2 is about to fight over the qualification spots, their captain, Anna, makes a surprising decision. She chooses to withdraw voluntarily, giving all 5 advancement spots to her teammates. The first round is over. 5 members of Team 2 successfully advance, while Anna, together with all of Team 1, a total of 7 people, are temporarily eliminated. But just then, the host suddenly announces the rules for round 2. The 5 advancing players must choose one person to compete in the elimination round, and that contestant can select 3 people from the remaining 6 eliminated players to form a team for the next match. In other words, although Anna voluntarily gave up her chance for her teammates, she has not completely lost hope. Will her kindness be repaid by her teammates? In this pitch-black room challenge, whoever reaches the finish line first wins $1,000. Jack, John, and Anna were led into the rooms separately by the crew. At that moment, none of them knew that the challenge had already quietly begun. Suddenly, all the lights went out, and the room was plunged into complete darkness. The 3 of them instantly panicked. There was no time to memorize the room's layout, so they could only fumble around blindly in the dark. While feeling his way forward, Jack was startled by a plant. Anna, on the other hand, stayed calm and immediately realized it was just a plant. John was the calmest of all. He skipped past that area entirely and headed straight toward a cabinet. With one push, he unexpectedly discovered a hidden exit. Soon after, Jack also realized there was something unusual about the cabinet, but in his panic, he knocked something over and got startled again. Luckily, he still managed to find the passage. Anna followed closely behind, and all 3 of them entered the second stage together. As soon as they stepped into the new area, they were still cautiously feeling things out when the host suddenly activated a mechanism. In an instant, the floor beneath them turned into a conveyor belt. Anna screamed on the spot in terror. Jack tried to stay calm, while John remained as composed as ever, but no one expected that ahead of them was a 3-meter deep cushioned pit. John was the first to realize something was wrong. He desperately tried to run back, but there was no way to stop himself. One after another, the 3 of them slid off the conveyor belt and fell into the deep pit filled with soft foam. Large foam blocks trapped them around the sides, but fortunately, the exit was right in the corner. As they groped around, the 3 of them quickly found the way out. The next stage was a narrow passage with obstacles hanging from the walls. All 3 kept bumping into them, and almost no one could avoid them completely. Only Anna managed to skillfully dodge one of the obstacles, but as soon as they entered the next room, everyone was stunned. The entire room was filled with laser beams. Jack wanted to show off a little, weaving around the beams with agile footwork. Even the host couldn't help but express amazement. But in the very next second, he touched a laser. Although Anna moved carefully, she still accidentally touched one. John slowly advanced along the wall, but in the end, he also failed to avoid them all. Even so, the 3 of them still made it smoothly to the exit. They almost simultaneously spotted a button mechanism on the wall and pressed it together to clear the stage. Waiting for them was a small shuttle cart. The cart moved slowly forward, then suddenly came to a sharp stop. Before they could react, they fell into another deep pit. This time, the pit was filled with plastic balls. It was very hard to move, but by now they had adapted and began feeling their way forward again. Anna was the first to discover a climbing rope and immediately sprinted toward the finish line. John followed closely behind, moving forward steadily. Jack, however, had used up a lot of energy and was left panting heavily from exhaustion. In the end, all 3 of them completed the challenge, but their scores were so close that it was hard to tell who had won. So, if you were in complete darkness, would you be able to make it through all these obstacles? 4 people are trapped in a 5-meter deep ice pit. With the ice walls too smooth to climb with bare hands, how will they survive this extreme situation? John checks his backpack and quickly comes up with an idea: make a simple rope out of tissues. But he soon realizes that paper cannot possibly support a person's weight. So John changes his strategy. If he can somehow secure the rope to the ice wall, he might still have a chance to climb out. Meanwhile, Danny thinks of using tape to increase friction. He tries wrapping tape all over his body and attempts to climb upward using its stickiness. However, the surface of the ice wall is far too smooth, and the tape cannot hold at all. After several failed attempts, he has no choice but to give up on that method. Among the four, Jack has the most useful tools. His backpack is full of fishing gear. Very quickly, Jack finds a workable solution. He uses an ice pick to carve footholds into the wall and climbs upward little by little. As for George, he is the most troubled because he has no proper tools. With a reminder from the host, he turns his attention to the clothes he is wearing. He first takes off his scarf and freezes it at the opening, hoping to use it for leverage to pull himself up. But once the scarf freezes, it becomes extremely slippery and impossible to grip. Even so, George does not give up. He continues by taking off more of his clothes and fastening them to the scarf. However, every time he gets close to the opening, he slides back down again because he has no solid foothold. At this point, Jack is already ahead of everyone else. Using the footholds he carved into the ice, he inches closer and closer to the top of the pit. Finally, with one last powerful push, Jack successfully hauls himself out of the hole and becomes the first person to escape. Seeing Jack succeed, John speeds up as well. He quickly makes a simple ladder, tests whether it can hold, and starts climbing upward. In the end, John also manages to escape safely. Now only George and Danny are left. Danny still has not found a truly effective solution. Even after trying again and again, he cannot secure his rope, and each time he gets halfway up, he slips back down. George, on the other hand, has no professional tools, but he manages to make a simple ladder using his clothes. Finally, just before his strength is completely gone, he grabs the edge of the ice pit and pulls himself up with all his remaining strength. George successfully escapes, while Danny unfortunately fails. If you fell into an ice pit, could you think of a better way to escape? 3 water pillars, each spaced 3 meters apart, and each level is more absurdly difficult than the last. Would you dare to take on the challenge? Level 1, jump from the bridge onto 2 pillars, one wrong step and you fall straight into the water. Jack was the first to go. After judging the distance, he jumped without hesitation. To everyone's surprise, he made it on the first try. After steadying himself, he quickly completed the second jump, and the whole crowd instantly erupted in cheers. The second contestant was John. He landed solidly on the first pillar with his first jump, but the very next second, his body suddenly wobbled and he fell straight into the water. The third was George. He also failed to keep his balance when he landed on the first pillar, but his reaction was lightning fast. He forced his center of gravity back with a big step and somehow regained his balance. Even the people standing nearby were stunned by what they saw. Mike was the last to go. He used all his strength to leap onto the first pillar, but when it came to the second one, he still fell just short. Unable to steady himself, he jumped straight into the water. Just when everyone thought level 2 would be easy, it turned out this pillar had a hidden trick. Jack went first again, but he misjudged the distance and only managed to land 1 foot on top of the pillar. Fortunately, he somehow forced himself to stay balanced and barely avoided falling into the water. Next came Alan. He gave himself a long running start and launched into the air, landing firmly on the pillar with both feet. Although his body was swaying badly, his reaction was incredibly quick. He spun around and jumped back to the shore, successfully pulling off an extreme self-save. The people nearby were completely dumbfounded by the scene. Then 2 more people took on the challenge. Both chose to do it with a standing long jump, and unbelievably, both of them succeeded. But the real hardest part was the third obstacle. It was also near the shore, but this time the bank was lower, which meant they had to jump upward from a lower position to a higher one. Mike asked to go first. He leaped forward with all his strength and was actually close to succeeding, but the surface of the pillar was too slippery. His foot slipped and he nearly fell straight into the water. Luckily, he grabbed the top of the pillar just in time and narrowly escaped disaster. Jack was next. His takeoff was extremely decisive, but unfortunately he still misjudged the distance. In the end, only one of his hands caught the top of the pillar. He struggled for a few moments but still fell into the water. Finally, it was George's turn. To everyone's surprise, he crashed straight into the pillar. But even more unbelievably, he somehow managed to cling tightly to it. Although the lower half of his body was already soaked in the water, the whole scene looked both awkward and hilarious. These 3 challenges got more outrageous with each level. How many levels do you think you could pass? 7 people are trapped inside a circle. Whoever lasts until the very end wins white 10,000. The moment the bull entered the arena, it immediately locked onto Jack. Caught completely off guard, Jack was knocked straight out of the circle and eliminated on the spot. Before everyone could even recover from the shock, the bull set its sights on John. Luckily, John reacted quickly and narrowly dodged the charge with a sharp sidestep. After that, the bull began pacing back and forth inside the ring, testing the field. Everyone instantly tensed up except George, who was still standing there in a daze. Sure enough, the very next second, the bull suddenly accelerated. George had no time to react and was sent flying out of the circle. In a very short time, 2 people were eliminated in a row. Meanwhile, Alan used nimble footwork to successfully avoid the bull's next attack. In the blink of an eye, only 5 people remained. After circling halfway around the ring, the bull locked onto Ken. To everyone's surprise, Ken quickly bent his knees and lowered himself into a defensive stance, somehow managing to withstand the clash head-on. Mike, however, was not so lucky. He tried to dodge out of the way, but lost his footing and was knocked directly out of the circle by the bull. Now only 4 people remained. The bull circled the ring once, then suddenly charged at John. Prepared this time, John grabbed the bull's horns with both hands and forced its head to one side, barely escaping danger. That moment instantly ignited the whole crowd. But before the cheers had even died down, Alan became the bull's next target. Unfortunately, he was so focused on dodging the bull that he failed to watch where he was stepping and was eventually knocked out of the circle. At this point in the contest, only 3 people were left. The bull soon locked onto its next prey, Bobby. What Bobby did left everyone stunned. He suddenly crouched down, trying to brace for impact in a defensive position, but the bull wasn't fazed at all. With one fierce charge, Bobby was immediately eliminated. In the blink of an eye, only Ken and John were left in the ring, but the bull wasn't finished yet. It suddenly changed direction and charged straight at Ken. At the critical moment, Ken once again grabbed the bull's horns, and with strength and perfect timing, forced the bull off course. Unwilling to give up, the bull backed off, gathered power, and launched a second attack. Amazingly, Ken neutralized the danger once again. After several direct confrontations, Ken continued to overpower the bull, and the crowd completely erupted. After repeated failures, the bull finally gave up on confronting Ken head-on. It turned halfway around the ring and suddenly redirected its attack toward John. This time, however, John could not regain his rhythm like before. In the end, he was knocked out of the circle by the bull, and with that, Ken was the last one standing and won the $10,000 prize. If it were you standing in that circle, how many rounds do you think you could survive? 4 men were locked up by a clown in 4 different prison cells. Whoever escaped first and managed to avoid being caught by the clown would win $50,000. John was trapped in a cell made of mesh. George was locked inside a carpet cell. Danny was thrown into a hay cell. And poor Jack had it worst of all. He was surrounded by 4 solid brick walls. The rules were simple. At the end of each round, the clown would throw each of them one tool. They could rely only on those tools to escape. In the first round, George got a plastic fly swatter. He smacked up a cloud of dust, but the carpet did not budge at all. John got a knitting tool, but to his surprise, it snapped the moment he tried to use it. Danny got a box of matches, but the hay would catch fire instantly if he used them, so he did not dare. Helpless, he had no choice but to wait for the next tool. Jack had it even worse. All he got was a spoon, which was useless against a brick wall. In the second round, everyone finally saw a glimmer of hope. George got a sickle and immediately sliced open the edge of the carpet. John got a knife and began cutting through the mesh layer by layer. Danny got an umbrella, but it got stuck in the hay and would not come out. It was less useful than just pulling the hay apart with his hands. Jack received a hammer. With one powerful strike, the wall actually cracked. In the third round, the gap between them grew even wider. John got a large pair of scissors and started cutting faster and faster. George got a saw, but after only a few uses, it snapped in half and his progress came to a halt. Danny got a pitchfork, but in such a cramped space he could not use it properly. He fell into despair. Only Jack kept swinging his hammer at the wall. The hole grew bigger and bigger, and he looked like he was about to break out. By the fourth round, Jack got another useful tool. With one hard smash, he became the first to escape from his cell. But he made too much noise, alerted the clown on the spot, and was caught again before he could get very far. George followed right behind him. He got a knife, cut along the opening in the carpet, and managed to crawl out as well. But the moment he showed himself, the clown caught him too. At that point, Danny finally got a handy tool of his own, a hoe. He loosened the hay with it, then pulled it apart with his bare hands and escaped too. But the result was the same. He could not avoid the clown either. In the blink of an eye, 3 of them had all been tied up. Now, only John remained undiscovered, and his mesh cell had only a few layers left. Do you think he can escape and save the others? You can win a prize of 100,000 yuan just by taste testing underwater. Jack decided to take on the challenge. The first dish was a salad. The moment the lid was lifted, all the vegetables floated up. Jack quickly stuffed the food into his mouth, afraid he might fail the challenge. He managed to complete the first dish. The second dish was pasta. This time, Jack learned from his mistake. The instant he lifted the lid, he grabbed the food. Then he attempted an even more difficult way of eating. He tossed the pasta toward the surface of the water and ate it bit by bit. Jack did not ignore the sausage side dish either, and even used a knife and fork to eat it. That only made him look forward to the next dish even more. The next dish was pizza. However, this time Jack miscalculated. As soon as the lid came off, the whole pizza floated up. Despite all the effort, he only managed to save 2 slices. The waiter had also thoughtfully prepared plenty of cheese. But while Jack was busy eating the pizza, he let his guard down. Another slice floated away to the surface. Jack quickly ate the only slice he still had in hand. He barely managed to complete this round. Before the next dish arrived, Jack grew a little impatient and pulled out some sunflower seeds. But the moment he opened them, they all floated away, and in the end, he only managed to eat a few. Fortunately, the next dish arrived soon enough. To his surprise, it was actually a live fish. As soon as the fish entered the water, it started swimming around everywhere, scaring Jack badly. Luckily, the fish soon sank to the bottom. This really annoyed Jack. He had not expected something like this at all, and he almost quit the competition on the spot. Thankfully, the waiter stepped in just in time and promised to serve a delicious dessert, which finally calmed Jack down. Soon, the waiter brought over some jelly. This time, Jack had learned his lesson and grabbed the food as soon as he opened the package. He originally wanted to use a spoon to put it into his mouth, but after several failed attempts, the jelly broke into small pieces instead. In the end, Jack had no choice but to use his mouth to eat the floating jelly directly. Only then did he complete the challenge. The final dessert was whipped cream. Jack simply pointed the nozzle straight into his mouth and completed the task with ease. Still not satisfied, he started trying to draw underwater with the cream, but the moment it sprayed out, it dissolved into wisps of white mist and vanished into the water. In the end, Jack completed the challenge. If it were you, do you think you could make it to the end?
This might be the safest shelter you'll ever see. To survive in the wilderness, surrounded by wild animals and brutal weather, this man turned an abandoned fridge into a fully functional home. One morning, Mark woke up in his old snow shelter, only to realize it was no longer safe. The snow had started to melt and the structure was slowly falling apart, so he had no choice but to leave. On his way to another spot, he stumbled across something unexpected, an old abandoned fridge. So he dragged it with him through the snow. When he finally reached his old shelter from last fall, he found it completely destroyed. An avalanche had collapsed the roof, burying the shelter under snow and debris. But instead of giving up, he started rebuilding. Using a shovel, he cleared out all the snow and reshaped the damaged walls. The frozen ground made everything harder. Every step took effort. Once the space was clean, he took a short break, then got right back to work. He gathered strong logs from nearby trees and built a frame for a new roof, then layered it with dry reeds, carefully placing each one to block wind and retain heat. But that wasn't enough. To seal every gap, he mixed snow and soil, heated it, and turned it into thick clay. Then spread it across the roof, filling every crack. Before it dried, he covered it with dry grass to keep rain from washing it away. Slowly, the shelter came back to life. Back inside, he cleaned out the fireplace, added dry wood, and lit the fire again. Warmth filled the space almost instantly. He added wooden boards to the bed to block moisture from the ground, then made a simple meal, heating food over hot stones in the fire. Nothing fancy, but in a place like this, it was everything. Next, he added insulation across the roof and walls to keep the heat inside. Then came the most interesting part. He turned the fridge into a front door, strong, insulated, and built to last. After adjusting the entrance to fit perfectly, he sealed every edge to keep the cold air out. Now the shelter was complete, warm, secure, livable. That night, he lay down in his sleeping bag as the fire slowly burned beside him. Outside, the wilderness was freezing, but inside, he was safe.
To win $100,000, 5 players must hide inside a villa. Whoever avoids capture for 1 hour will win $100,000. Player 1 George has a brilliant idea. After studying the house blueprint, he finds a large space under the bathtub, so he decides to remove the bathtub and build a secret hiding spot underneath. He lays carpet on the floor, hangs a TV on the wall. He can monitor the hunter's every move via cameras. It will be extremely hard for the hunter to find him. Player 2 Mary plans to dig a hole in the wall, then hide inside it. Cover the opening with a painting as cover. I think she is taking a huge risk. Paintings are always checked by hunters, but she nails the painting firmly to the wall, and even locks it from the inside. I take back what I just said. The hunter will never find her. Player 3 Rick goes to the garage. He decides to hide in the attic above. He uses a lift to go up and seals the opening. The hunter will never find him this way. Player 4 William also has a unique idea. He actually takes apart a refrigerator, builds a hiding space inside the wall, then puts the refrigerator back, leaving only a hidden door for entry. Who would expect someone to hide behind a fridge? But there is a problem after cutting the fridge. The hole cannot be sealed perfectly. He can only reinstall it as best as possible, but still leaves a flaw. Player 5 Sean is even more extreme. He removes the storage room door, blocks the entrance with a bookshelf. No one can find the space behind it. He believes animals bring good luck, so he draws some animals on the wall, praying the hunter will not find this place. Even if discovered, it is hard to reach. All 5 players are hidden. The hunter appears. He is fully prepared. He carefully studied all 5 players' hiding habits beforehand, knowing their usual hiding locations, but he finds nothing after searching the yard. Clearly they changed hiding spots this time. The hunter has to go inside. His search method is very destructive. He is nearly tearing the house apart, but he cannot win without destroying things this round. The hunter enters the bathroom. No ordinary person would suspect someone under the tub. The hunter thinks the same. Overconfident George deliberately opens a bag of chips, trying to tease the hunter. Unexpectedly, the hunter follows the sound to the kitchen. He immediately notices something wrong with the fridge. No one installs a fridge inside a wall. He opens it and finds something is amiss, but William refuses to come out. The hunter forces him out in his own way. 1 player captured. This hunter is extremely capable. He clearly knows the player's hiding spots. 4 players remain. The hunter searches around and reaches the garage. Unexpectedly, the player set a trap. Rick is quite clever, but the garage is limited in space. The hunter rules it out and returns indoors to search. Hiding under the stairs is highly possible. The hunter knocks and finds the sound abnormal, lifts the carpet and spots a gap. He continues searching carefully, finally opens the stair compartment, but he freezes upon entering. No one is inside. This makes him furious. He continues destructive searching. Seeing this, George teases the hunter through a speaker. "You will never find me." His words got William caught earlier. This time he gets Sean caught too. The hunter finds the bookshelf can be moved. Someone is clearly hiding inside. He becomes excited. Sean inside is extremely nervous. As the hunter moves the bookshelf, Sean is eliminated. Rick is too greedy. The loud snack eating exposes his position. The hunter pinpoints his location by sound, knowing he is hiding in the garage. He even finds the switch. 3rd player.
A 1 square meter house. Live in it for 30 days. You get $100,000. Would you dare? Ron decided to try. As soon as he entered, he realized something was wrong. His lower body was on the 1st floor, while his upper body was already on the 2nd. The space was absurdly small, but it was fully equipped. There was a toilet. You could shower. There was an induction stove. You could cook. There was even a TV. At first glance, it seemed okay, until he saw the bed at a 90-degree angle. You had to sleep folded. He went silent for 2 seconds, but thinking of over $3,000 a day, he endured it. The first thing he did wasn't organizing clothes. He plugged in his game console. The screen lit up, and he started playing. A few hours passed quickly, but then problems came. His legs couldn't stretch. His waist stayed bent. His body began to protest. He could only keep stretching, his only form of exercise. At night, the show delivered food. He started cooking, but the room was too small. He couldn't escape. It felt like being steamed. No air conditioning, no airflow. After eating, he lay down scrolling videos. Late at night, it was time to sleep, but he couldn't sleep well. His body stayed bent. Even turning over was difficult. The next morning, Ron woke up sore all over, as if he hadn't slept. He quickly stretched, drank coffee, trying to wake up. Showering was even worse. The space was too tight. Even breathing felt suffocating. He didn't dare turn on hot water, afraid of lacking oxygen. During the day, a friend came to visit. They played games, one above the other. It was enjoyable for a while, but soon the friend left. It was too cramped to stay. Later, the show provided toys, but most couldn't even be used in such a small space. Only assembling toys barely worked. Days passed. Eat, play, stare blankly, repeat. By the 3rd day, Ron's condition clearly worsened. His body stiffened. His mind became confused. The show even sent a beautiful cleaner, but the space was so small, they were almost pressed together. The situation became awkward. At some point, Ron's wife was informed and came to check on him. She chatted with him, brought fruit, and encouraged him. Ron felt a bit better and decided to continue, but reality quickly hit again. On the 6th day, he broke down, not because he didn't want to continue, but because his body truly couldn't take it. Ron chose to quit. The $100,000, he didn't get it. If it were you, how many days could you last? 9 people are buried in the desert. Their bodies are completely buried, only their heads are exposed. The rule is simple: last 24 hours, win AOE 5,000. Sounds easy? It's actually extreme torture. At the start, everyone is confident, but the first thing the crew does is remove all protection from one contestant wearing sunglasses and a towel. The sun hits his face directly, then the extras begin. Contestant 1, Ethan, is bombarded with constant noise, his ears almost breaking. Contestant 2, Lucas, has bugs crawling on his face, his whole body freezes. Contestant 3, Ryan, gets a bucket of water poured on him. The sand turns to mud and sticks to his face. Contestant 4, Chris, has slime poured on his head, slowly dripping down in the heat. Contestant 5, Mark, has a snake placed on his neck, slowly tightening. Contestant 6, Daniel, has burning charcoal thrown around him. The temperature spikes instantly. Contestant 7, Kevin, is treated well, surrounded by ice. Contestant 8, Lily, has thorny roses placed near her face. Any movement could cut her. Only if they don't quit can they get sunscreen. But before it reaches her, Lily breaks down. She quits first. Right after, Ethan can't hold on. His body goes numb. He gives up. Round 2 begins. A box is placed in front front of everyone, they can only use their mouths to pull a rope toward themselves. Some start cheating, secretly using their hands. After pulling the box closer, rewards are given. Kevin gets sunglasses. Daniel gets a strange tool. Mark only gets a useless decoration. He loses it on the spot and quits. Lucas gets a sunshade but can't handle the heat anymore. He leaves too. Time reaches 19 hours. Chris suddenly says, "I can't do this," and quits. The weather suddenly changes. It starts raining. Kevin can't handle the cold and leaves. Only 2 people remain. The crew's final move, food temptation. Ryan stares at the food for a few seconds, then surrenders. Only Daniel is left. He says nothing, endures to the end. 24 hours are up. He wins, $5,000 in hand. The question is, would you really want to earn money like this? The room was swarming with flies. The moment George stepped inside, he was surrounded by a dark cloud of buzzing insects, a $10,000 challenge, and it started on nightmare mode. To distract himself, he could only hang on by playing video games. Luckily, after half an hour, the flies in the room gradually started to calm down. George thought he might be able to make it through soon enough, but then the producers quickly raised the difficulty by releasing 3 chickens into the room. As the room became more chaotic, the flies that had settled down started swarming again. Soon after, the crew brought in some ingredients. Ignoring the flies circling all around him, George immediately started cooking. Fortunately, the cooking smoke temporarily drove the flies away. But when it was finally time to eat, the smell of food instantly caught their attention. They kept buzzing in front of George's face, forcing him to eat as fast as he could. At this point, only 5 hours of the challenge had passed. He tried to sleep, but the constant buzzing of the flies and the glaring lights kept him awake. After an hour of failing to fall asleep, he completely broke down. Then the producers brought in more food and even moved in a blower fan. As the wind blew, the flies were constantly stirred up again, and George had no choice but to face them flying all over the room once more. After struggling late into the night, he gave up trying to sleep and just kept playing games to pass the time. Early the next morning, the producers introduced a new challenge. If George could stay completely still for 5 minutes, he would win a protective head net. To make it even harder, they told him to take off his shirt. Determined to get the gear, George agreed without hesitation. Once the challenge began, a fan and a blower created constant interference. George endured the noise, while forcing himself not to swat away the flies landing on his body. In the end, he made it through the full 5 minutes and successfully won the head net. The moment George put it on, he felt instant relief. For the first time, he was finally able to eat in peace, even though the producers still tried to scare him with sudden loud noises. After so many hours of torment, George had already become numb to it all. With only 5 hours left until the end, the flies in the room gradually became less active. George finally found a chance to rest for a while. At last, the full 24 hours were over. George successfully completed the challenge and walked away with the $10,000 prize. If it were you, would you stick it out for $10,000? Minus 20 degrees Celsius freezer. 4 contestants face the ultimate survival challenge. Whoever lasts until the end will win a mysterious grand prize. Jack, John, George, and Danny compete against each other. Not only must they endure the freezing cold, but they also have to complete tasks every 10 minutes. Who can survive to the very end? As the game begins, all 4 enter their individual freezers, where the temperature is a bone-chilling minus 20 degrees Celsius. The others seem unfazed by the cold, but Jack is the exception. He bundles himself up tightly as soon as he enters. Soon the other 3 also wrap themselves snugly in their blankets. 8 minutes later, the host spins a wheel to announce a task. Each contestant could win an extra blanket, but only Jack doesn't receive one. Poor Jack has no choice but to keep moving to maintain his body heat. The other 3 are fully wrapped in their blankets. 20 minutes in, the host announces a new challenge, 30 push-ups. For Jack, this is a blessing. He desperately needs movement to fight the cold. The other 2 immediately begin, but John hesitates. Does he have a secret way to resist the cold? However, the exercise doesn't warm Jack. It actually accelerates his elimination. Eventually, Jack can't endure the cold any longer and quits the challenge. The remaining 3 refuse to give up, curling up and wrapping their blankets tightly around themselves. At the 30-minute mark, the host announces the next task, remove some clothing. The 3 contestants are extremely reluctant, but comply for the prize. Losing a layer in the freezer makes the cold even more intense, so they tightly wrap themselves in blankets to maintain warmth. George even starts doing push-ups again to stay warm. Soon, all 3 adapt to the freezing conditions, even chatting across the freezers to gauge their opponent's endurance. But 5 minutes later, one freezer door opens. John! He can no longer withstand the cold and withdraws from the challenge. Only Danny and George remain, and now the real test begins. The host brings over a basin of ice-cold water and pours it directly into the freezer. Danny screams and leaves the freezer, quitting the game. George endures the full hour and emerges as the ultimate winner. If it were you, how long could you last? All you have to do is grab the hook hanging over the water and make it back to the marked area, and you win $1,000. Would you dare to try a challenge like this? Tall and athletic with an impressive vertical leap, Jack was the first to step up. He kept adjusting his angle, waited for the right moment, and then launched himself into the air. He actually managed to grab the hook, but before the crowd could even start cheering, he lost his grip and fell straight into the water. Jack's failure instantly made the atmosphere tense. The second contestant was Danny. He was clearly more cautious than the first guy. He warmed up thoroughly, loosened up his body, and controlled his breathing. Once he felt ready, he jumped, but to his surprise, he barely missed the hook and dropped straight into the water. With two people failing in a row, the spectators started to wonder, could anyone actually pull this off? Just then, John stepped forward. He explained his plan and decided to give it a try himself. But unexpectedly, just as he was about to jump, his foot slipped and he nearly fell off the railing. Fortunately, he recovered quickly. This time, he sprang into the air and actually caught the hook with one hand. The whole crowd erupted. Even more amazingly, he used the swing to adjust his body, pushed off again, and somehow leapt back onto the bridge. That entire sequence left everyone stunned. Seeing John succeed, George immediately gained confidence. He decided to use the hook's swinging momentum to shorten the distance to his target. He locked his eyes on the hook, timed it perfectly, and jumped. He successfully grabbed it, but on the way back, he failed to seize the best moment. He lost his balance for a second and almost fell into the water. Luckily, at the critical moment, he grabbed the railing. Everyone at the scene held their breath for him. Next, Mike also chose to make his move while the hook was swinging. His timing was excellent, and he managed to grab the hook smoothly after jumping. The real difficulty was getting back. Mike kept adjusting his angle in midair, and his strength was draining fast. After struggling for quite a while, he still couldn't complete the return jump and barely managed to grab the guardrail to end the challenge. Then Ken decided to make things even harder. He wasn't satisfied with a normal jump, so he chose to attempt a double jump approach. Without much hesitation, he went straight into the move in one fluid motion. Unfortunately, that also led to mistakes. Although he did manage to touch the hook, he still fell into the water, and the challenge ended in failure. So, if it were you, would you be confident enough to complete this challenge? As long as you survive 24 hours in a glue-covered room, you can win $100,000. On top of that, a random task is drawn every 2 hours. Would you dare take on a challenge like this? Anna walks into this unusual room full of excitement. The floor, the walls, the tables and chairs, and even the food inside the fridge are all covered in powerful glue. Before long, she draws her first task, take off her shoes. The moment her bare feet touch the sticky floor, she cannot help frowning. Before she even has time to adjust, a new problem appears. She tries to sit down and rest, but the chair sticks directly to her clothes, and it takes a lot of effort to pull herself free. Soon, the next round of tasks arrives. This time, she draws, stick to the wall for 10 minutes. Anna carefully leans against the wall, but the glue under her feet keeps throwing off her balance, so she has to constantly adjust her posture. Those 10 short minutes feel incredibly long. By the time the task is over, her clothes are covered in glue marks, and she looks completely miserable. 2 hours later, Anna draws another task, get covered in poured glue. A large bucket of pink sticky slime is dumped over her from above, instantly covering her whole body and making her intensely uncomfortable. Anna lets out a startled scream and can only slowly clean the glue off herself bit by bit. By the time she is mostly done, it is already dark outside. After so many non-stop challenges, she is both exhausted and hungry. She opens the fridge, takes out some food and tries to heat it up, but once warmed, it gives off a sharp, unpleasant smell, so she has no choice but to give up. Fortunately, her next draw gives her a wooden board, which becomes her rare safe zone. Late that night, Anna rests using the wooden board and a simple mattress. When she wakes up the next morning, she still feels awful. Her clothes and the wooden board are stuck tightly together, and it takes a great deal of effort just to stand up. Still, the short rest helps her recover a lot of energy, and she firmly believes she can make it to the end. Not long after, a new task arrives, complete 10 sit-ups. In an environment covered with glue, every movement is heavily restricted. Anna gives it everything she has and manages to finish with great difficulty, ending up completely out of breath. As the timer gets closer and closer to the finish, Anna even comes up with a new use for the room, sticking books to the wall. Finally, the very last task arrives. This time, she draws, endure being covered in flour. Compared with the glue from earlier, this one is much easier. Anna grits her teeth and pushes through, successfully completing the final task. The countdown reaches 0, and the challenge officially ends. Anna completes the challenge and wins the $100,000 prize. If it were you, would you be willing to try a challenge like this? In this water-based challenge, whoever can hold out until the very end will win a $10,000 prize. Jack, John, and George all came up with surprisingly similar designs. Each of them used a board combined with hollow materials to make a simple floating device. Half an hour later, all three were ready. But before the official competition began, they first had to test their devices on the water. Jack went first. At first, his device floated smoothly, but before he could even sit on it, it suddenly fell apart, and Jack dropped straight into the water. John was second. He placed the board facing upward forward and tried to straddle the device, but because he couldn't keep his balance, he flipped into the water shortly after getting on. Fortunately, after making some adjustments, he finally passed the test. George went last. His device was obviously much more stable, and he could even stand up on it. Not wanting to fall behind, Jack and John quickly reinforced their own devices. This time, both of them passed the test successfully. The host then officially announced the start of the competition. The 3 contestants had to take turns drawing task cards and completing the challenges, otherwise they would have to accept a punishment. In the first round, Jack drew a task requiring him to carry 5 kilograms of extra weight. John drew a card that said, transfer the next task to someone else. George drew a task requiring him to carry 10 kilograms. After the first round, John was the only one who successfully avoided punishment. In the second round, Jack thought drawing a small dumbbell would make things easy, but the difficulty suddenly increased in the very next moment. John used his task transfer card and passed his own challenge to Jack. The task was to retrieve an object with a magnet. This meant Jack had to keep his balance while completing the retrieval task. For someone whose device was already unstable, it was simply too difficult. In the end, Jack chose to give up on the task and accept the weight penalty instead. However, while George continued drawing tasks, another accident happened. Jack lost his balance and fell straight into the water, eliminating himself from the competition. At that point, only John and George were left. During the next several rounds, both of them completed their tasks successfully, but neither managed to gain a clear advantage, and the competition reached a stalemate. At that moment, the host proposed a final load-bearing test to decide the winner. In the earlier challenges, George's device had already carried an additional 43.6 kilograms. John had to exceed that number to win. However, in the final test, John's device failed to support more weight. In the end, George won the competition thanks to his device's greater stability and weight-bearing capacity. If it were you, what materials would you choose to build it with? This is a seesaw bullfighting competition. 2 teams take turns entering the arena. 4 men versus 4 women. Whichever team lasts longer wins the $1,000 prize. The women's team goes first. The match begins, and the bull charges into the arena. As soon as it enters, it goes straight for Anna, but she barely manages to dodge it. The next second, the bull charges at Helen. Luckily, Helen reacts quickly and avoids the attack. Just then, the bull suddenly spins around and launches a fierce attack on Amy. Suna, on the opposite side, quickly tries to make up for it. Although she barely manages to save the situation, the rhythm of all 4 women is completely thrown off. The bull immediately takes advantage of the chaos. Anna is pushed by the bull and spun around for more than half a circle. Under the intense pressure, Helen finally can't take it anymore. She suddenly jumps off the seesaw and runs for it. As expected, the bull is instantly drawn to her and turns around to chase Helen wildly. Fortunately, Helen is fast enough and successfully escapes the arena. Not long after, Anna is also forced to withdraw. Now only Amy and Suna are left, struggling to hang on. At this point, the bull's attack seems to slow down a little, but neither of them dares to relax. The bull keeps probing, still waiting for an opening. Sure enough, the next second it suddenly turns back and charges directly at Amy. The attack comes far too suddenly, and the coordination between the two instantly falls apart. Seeing that the situation is completely out of control, Suna has no choice but to jump off the seesaw and try to save herself. But the bull reacts even faster and immediately chases after her. In the end, Suna is still caught up in the danger. Amy can only flee the scene in panic as well. In the end, the women's team successfully lasts a full 20 minutes. Next, it's the men's team's turn. As soon as the match starts, the bull goes all out. It gives them no time to adapt and opens with a fierce wave of attacks. However, the men's team reacts just as quickly. The 4 men dodge one after another, managing to avoid several direct charges from the bull. After a few rounds, the bull seems to change its strategy. Instead of attacking blindly, it keeps testing them. Just when the 4 men start to relax a little, the bull suddenly turns and rushes straight at Jack. Although Jack is completely caught off guard, he manages to hold his ground at the critical moment. Instead, it is Mike standing nearby who panics first. And that moment of panic is exactly what the bull notices. The very next second, it lunges straight at Mike. Mike is so frightened that he jumps off the seesaw on the spot. In the chaos, George also takes the chance to run out of the arena. Now only Jack and Alan remain on the men's team. The 2 are still hanging on, and the bull no longer rushes to attack. For a while, both sides are locked in a standoff. The bull keeps circling and probing, while Jack and Alan continue maneuvering around it, dragging things out for several more rounds. Then, at that very moment, the bull spots an opening and suddenly launches a fierce charge. This time, Jack can no longer keep his balance. His foot slips and he falls straight off the seesaw, and with that, the match comes to an end. In the end, the men's team lasts only 10 minutes. The women's team wins the competition. If it were you, how many minutes do you think you could last? The challengers stand on the edge of a 100-meter-high dam, where a single mistake could send them plunging into the abyss. Would you dare watch their life-or-death leap? The dam has several platforms spaced at uneven distances, and 4 challengers decide to use them to make their way to the other side. Jack is the first to step onto the starting platform. After building up momentum, he bursts forward and follows the curve of the slope, landing steadily on the platform across from him to complete the first jump. John goes second. After landing on the second platform, he immediately launches himself toward the next one, and successfully lands on the third section. The landing area here is wider. Jack demonstrates first and passes it with ease. Danny jumps next and nearly slips off the platform when he lands. George also makes it across successfully with guidance from his teammates. After a short break, the group arrives at the real challenge. The fourth platform is not too difficult. The truly tricky part is getting to the fifth platform, which is a full 10 meters away. Even John, the strongest among them, is not completely confident. After discussing it, they decide to practice repeatedly first. After several rounds of attempts, John finally feels the time is right. With everyone watching, he takes a deep breath, accelerates into a sprint, and at last successfully soars onto the fifth platform. The whole scene instantly erupts in cheers. Seeing John succeed, Jack is fired up as well. He sprints forward with all his strength, adjusts his direction with his arms in midair, and finally lands steadily. George goes next. He gets ready and charges forward, but unfortunately his foot slips midway. He loses his balance and ultimately falls into the water. Danny is unable to overcome his fear and withdraws from the challenge. At this point, only John and Jack remain. They continue forward, completing several more platform jumps in a row until they finally reach the last obstacle. But another problem appears. The final platform is not level with the shore, so how are they supposed to get back onto land? At that moment, John notices holes in the wall and quickly comes up with an idea. He bursts forward in several long strides, grabs onto one of the circular holes in the wall, and finally climbs onto the shore, becoming the first person to complete the challenge. With John's experience to guide him, Jack immediately tries the same method. He launches himself forward and successfully grabs the small hole. Everything seems to be going smoothly, but at the very last moment, his arm gives out, his grip slips, and he falls straight into the water. In the end, only John completes the challenge. What about you? Would you dare try something like this? Once you sink into a non-Newtonian fluid, escaping is nearly impossible. 3 contestants face off, and the winner will receive a $50,000 prize. During the competition, they must also complete tasks assigned by the host. As soon as the game begins, all 3 start stepping on the fluid continuously. If they stop, they sink in and can't pull themselves out. 10 minutes in, the host introduces the first challenge, a basketball shootout. Each player has 3 attempts, and the one with the fewest makes will face a penalty, carrying extra weight for 10 minutes. Jack goes first, but he misses all 3 shots. John stays calm and easily makes 1 shot. Danny scores on his final attempt. Jack comes in last and must carry the penalty weight. The 3 continue moving in the back, trying to stay active. 5 minutes later, Jack is already drenched in sweat. When 10 minutes are up, he eagerly drops the backpack. The host announces the second task, dart throwing. Again, each has 3 tries, and the one with the fewest hits will be penalized. Jack's luck does not improve. He only hits the dartboard on his last throw. The other 2 hit every time. This time, the penalty is being bound with tape. Binding Jack's hands is easy, but as they try to bind his feet, he sinks into the fluid. His strength is exhausted, and he can no longer pull his feet free. Jack is eliminated, leaving only John and Danny. The host announces the next task, catching ping pong balls with one hand. Whoever drops a ball first must pause for 5 seconds. John and Danny slow down, moving their legs while hitting the ball. John throws the ball high to buy time while Danny keeps the ball low, controlling it in a small area. Suddenly, John drops a ball and must face the penalty. His legs are gradually swallowed by the fluid, but when the time is up, he summons all his strength and breaks free. In the final round, the host introduces no new challenges, leaving it purely to endurance. At the signal, both squat halfway. John spins while stepping on the fluid, while Danny squats in place, neither willing to give up. Finally, the host calls for a one-legged jump. The difficulty increases. John can no longer hold on, sinks on one leg, and lacks the strength to escape. Danny emerges as the ultimate winner of the competition. If it were you, could you last until the end? What would a lollipop look like if it were enlarged 100 times? Jack decided to make a giant strawberry ladle pop. The first step was making the plastic stick. Jack found a huge plastic tube and even punched square holes into it to recreate the original look perfectly. Next came the strawberry flavoring. Jack prepared a large tray of fresh strawberries. He removed the stems, washed them, cut them into pieces, and placed them into a glass jar. Then he poured in strong liquor, sealed the jar, and left the strawberries to infuse. 7 days later, the strawberries had noticeably lost their color. As soon as the jar was opened, a rich fruity aroma filled the air. He then poured the strawberry liquid into a pot and simmered it over low heat to evaporate the alcohol and excess water. In the end, he got a pure natural strawberry flavoring. Then came the chewing gum center. Jack chopped up gum base, added the flavoring and red coloring, and heated it until soft. He kept stirring and kneading it, then fixed the gum onto one end of the plastic tube, completing the lollipop's core. The next step was preparing the mold for the hard candy shell. Jack used a spherical mold with a diameter of 50 centimeters. To make it easier to remove later, he first brushed grease inside the mold, then lined it with parchment paper, and added sealing strips. Now came the most critical part, boiling the sugar. He poured 5 kilograms of white sugar and 1 liter of water into a pot, then added the strawberry flavoring and cooked it down into a thick syrup. But as soon as he tried the first pour, problems appeared immediately. The syrup was too hot, and the bottom of the mold began to warp the moment it was poured in. Even worse, Jack had miscalculated the total amount of syrup. After pouring in 2 full batches, he discovered that the mold was not even half full. With no other choice, he first placed the candy stick into the mold, then kept cooking more syrup to fill the remaining space. However, it took a full day for the giant candy to completely harden. What was even more unexpected was that the candy in the mold simply would not come apart. In the end, Jack had to take out an axe and split the mold open. Only then did the giant strawberry lollipop finally appear in full. The finished product not only looked impressively true to the original, but also tasted surprisingly good. Would you be willing to try a candy like this?